Hi everyone, it's Maddie Brady. We're here to get real about mental health. Stay tuned for some great conversations with some very special guests. Hi everyone, welcome to Get Real. We are here with Serena, and she actually just celebrated her 3 years of sobriety this past Friday. So congratulations.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Of course. So I would love to really start with how drugs and alcohol became an issue for you. I think oftentimes there's an image in people's head of what an alcoholic, what a drug addict looks like. And I think you definitely defy the standard image of what that looks like. So how do you feel like you first fell into that?
Yeah, for sure. So I'll start out with the fact that when I was a kid, I thought that if you were to have a problem with drugs and alcohol, you had to be homeless and living underneath a bridge. Mm-hmm. Like, I think a lot of people think that. And the older I got and the more that I was using mostly alcohol, I was kind of stunned to see some of my friends stop drinking. Mm-hmm. And as a kid, you know, I just like idolized a lot of people in my life, a lot of adults who drank a lot, honestly. Mm-hmm. And it was, you know, it was how they lived. It was just like their lifestyle, la-di-da. And, you know, as a little kid, it was like, well, what do you want to be when you're older? And I was like, well, a lot of me wants to become like this investment banker who changes the world and starts all these nonprofits and does all this amazing stuff and like adds to humanity. And the other half of me was like, oh, and she's going to be drinking all the time, mm-hmm. because alcohol is a part of life. Like, I had this thing in my head that to be an adult meant that you were drinking. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, as people in my life as I was growing up, inevitably some people were getting sober, and suddenly I would hear talk about them, like nasty gossip, and mm-hmm. people talking about how like, oh, like they had this, da da da, and wow. It really in my head put this stigma that like living a sober life was not a good life, mm-hmm. and it was not an adult life. Mm-hmm. But then as I started drinking more, went to college, and I joke that in high school I was a photographer. I like did a lot of photography at school. I loved it. It was like my greatest passion, that and tennis. And when I got to college, I didn't have photography and I didn't have tennis. I went to school for business. I loved it. I had a great time there. But like everyone drank. Like every single person at that school drank. And you know, I just fell into it. It was like my life kind of started to center around, as it does for a lot of college students, like when's the next frat party? When's the next this? When's the next that? But this idea of like wanting to be this like great leader in the world, like was still in my brain. I still wanted that. But most of the time for me, the need and desire to like go out and drink was just bigger. It was mm-hmm. higher. It was greater. And, so yeah, like alcohol kind of became like the highest power in my life, mm-hmm. For a while. And, you know, as that power kept growing and growing, my mom started to see that. And she suddenly, her attitude towards alcohol was changing. And I could hear it, because she would suddenly say like, you know, this person doesn't drink anymore. This person doesn't drink. Whereas like when I was a kid, among all of her friends, I could specifically remember them like kind of talking poorly about those certain people. Mm-hmm. And suddenly she was kind of laying these little like, you know, breadcrumbs of mm-hmm. like, maybe you should think about it.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more breadcrumbs that she laid, the more it was like, okay, like it's an idea. It's mm-hmm. a thought. And also, you know, on the inside for me, like I was crumbling. There was no way in this world that I was going to become like a responsible human being mm-hmm. ever if I kept drinking the way that I wanted to drink, and felt like I needed to drink. And so, yeah, about 18 to 25, I drank very consistently. I was blacking out. I used, you know, alcohol, but some other forms as well. And mm-hmm. Over time, when the pandemic started, I just had a moment where I was like, I cannot keep hurting myself like this. Like I had a really bad blackout Memorial Day weekend of 2020. And I just like looked at my friends who were sober, who were living big lives, by the way. Mm-hmm. Like they were not homeless and under a bridge. They were killing it. Like one of them was in medical school. Another woman was like 10 years sober and running her own magazine.
Wow.
And my other friend, like she was working in finance, but she had this dream to like work in more of the political realm. And she was starting that vision. And I was like, wait, these guys are all doing things in life. And, you know, I'm still here not doing what I want to be doing.
Exactly.
And, you know, I just looked at the people that had what I wanted. And the people that had what I wanted actually happened to be sober too. And that idea of sobriety being you had to have lost everything started to really subside to the point that I was like, you know what, maybe I'll go try to get what they have.
Wow. I relate to so much of what you said because I had a very similar experience where I always had this drive inside me, but then, and was always super ambitious and had these big dreams, but then the alcohol always won. But oftentimes I hear a lot of people that don't get that drive and don't have that ambition until they get sober and get into sobriety. Whereas I think it's even more so difficult when you do have that, but you're actively watching everything you want become out of reach, and you're seeing those people start to achieve things and you're not, and it just becomes quite evident that you're doing something wrong. But at least for me, I couldn't even recognize at first. Like I just was not making the connection what was wrong. I just knew that I felt like everything that I had wanted and this life that I had wanted was crumbling, and that I was starting to fall behind and not be where other people were, and other people that I was similar in school with were doing so much better than me, but I couldn't figure out what was wrong until finally I got sober, and then it clicks.
There we go.
But no, I think that that's amazing, especially that you had people in your life that were demonstrating what the gifts of sobriety looked like, because not a lot of people have that. That's amazing. Was it difficult for you to grasp sobriety, or those early days? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, those early days were definitely interesting. So my sobriety date, as in the last time that I used any sort of drug or alcohol, is October 20th of 2020. And that is actually my mom's birthday.
That's amazing.
Which is like a nice little
yeah, that's so
shout
special.
out to her and to, you know, the universe there, for gifting us that. But that first week, I knew at that last blackout on Memorial Day weekend. So it was coming out of the pandemic. I was in South Florida. So like, quote, coming out of the pandemic was, you know, 3 months later.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of friends had started going out again, and this was May 24th-ish. And I was invited to a dinner, and it was with one of my best friends, her mom, who's a very public personality, her other friends, who were all big personalities. And I had to have drunk like 5 bottles of white wine at that dinner accidentally. Like I actually had no idea how much I was drinking. I was just having such a good time. Like it was like such a fun night. Like we're finally free. And this like fear and anxiety that I've been holding on to because this pandemic, like nobody knew how long it was going to go for. Like I was taking like weed gummies almost every night to go to bed and before I went to bed, just to like feel something before I went to bed and like kind of get rid of this fear and anxiety that I was really holding on to. I was doing like Zoom happy hours, drinking a bottle of wine almost every night. You know, it's pandemic times. Like it's kind of what people were doing. And leading up to the pandemic though, I'd served grand jury duty for a whole month in New York City. Wow. And for probably 6 or so months before that, I had been listening to the Secret podcast. And I call it Secret because it was my secret. And it was... I forgot the name of it, but it's a recovery podcast on Spotify that has like millions of listeners. Okay. So my mind circa, and actually I've been listening to it already a year at that point. Summer 2018, end of that summer, I started listening to it. And the idea of recovery and sobriety was like lingering in my mind. And so I'd listened to enough stories to be like, I identify with all these people. I just didn't know where to turn. And a lot of those stories were telling me, like, go talk to the people who have what you want, who also might be sober. And so I had this one very public last night drinking, Memorial Day weekend 2020, with this big group of people that were amazing, and so much fun, but I blacked out completely. Woke up the next day with all the remorse in the world, saying to myself, like, I will never do this again. I will never, ever, ever, like, treat myself like this ever again. And the next day I went for a walk on the beach with one of my girlfriends who was sober, who's in medical school. And I said to her, like, what if I just keep drinking wine? She looked at me like, what if you just quit everything for like a month? Like start with 30 days. Like, how about that? And I was like, okay, I can grasp that. And then I was like, but no. Like I had a million excuses. Like, and I would talk, and I talked to her. I talked to my friend who has the magazine. I talked to my other friend who wants to be into politics. And like the three of them all just said, like, just take it one day at a time. Meanwhile, I'm like, but my wedding, I need to have champagne. Mind you, at this point, I'd never had a relationship longer than 5 months. So like, I don't know why I was trying to think about my wedding at this point. And, you know, one day at a time, I started to see my life getting better. And so that first month turned into a sober summer. And like, I don't know why I thought it was cool to just tell everyone I was having a sober summer, but like that's what I did, and it like kind of worked for me. And like I was doing all the things still. I was out at Rushmeyer's in Montauk. I was like still going to like all the places that I did when I was drinking and was blacking out in all those places. Only I was doing it sober. And the one thing I said to myself after that dinner, the last dinner I drank at, was that I don't want my inability to not drink inhibit my ability to still be a young 20-year-old. Like I was 25 years old. I was like, I still want to have fun. Yeah. Like to me, alcohol equals fun. But like other people having fun without alcohol. So maybe I could too. And so, you know, there were these like little bargains I had to make with myself really early on. And I kept talking to more people. I just kept meeting more people who were sober. It was like my greatest like networking thing I've ever done. Like I'd ask like one person, oh, do you know anyone else? Like, can I go talk to them? And they're like, yeah, talk to this person. I just kept getting connected and like building this community slowly but surely over that summer, that of people who were not drinking but still living really, really big lives. And to me, really, really big was like going to Surf Lodge still. Like that was my bar. I was like, I just want to be able to still have fun. And that's fine. Like that's what it looks like for me then. And that's kind of how I got through it, was like, I don't want to be boring. Like that was my biggest fear at the time. And so that dinner happened, last night drinking. 1 week later, I went to the exact same dinner. Like everyone was the same. It was the same dinner, restaurant. It was the same person organizing the reservation. And I looked at my best friend and I was like, I need a friend who like knows that I'm really struggling right now. And she'd known, like I've been blacking out so much with her. And I was like, will you just kind of be my ally here? And like, if they try to offer me an alcoholic drink, like, can you just say no for me? Yeah. Like, can you just like swat it out of their hands or something? And she was like, anything for you, Serena. I got you. And so having that one friend that was like my ally also like really helped with those first couple times of like wanting to still be young and have fun with my old friends, and not wanting to like isolate myself and like shut myself in. So yeah, I went to the exact same dinner 1 week later, 5 days of sobriety or 6 days of sobriety at this point. And I had a great time. Like her mom looked at me and she's like, oh, I take breaks from drinking all the time. This is what I do. And she told me about a mocktail. And she like explained this amazing mocktail to me. I still love it. It's cucumber, mint, lemon, and seltzer. And like you can make in so many different variations, like with like real cucumber, real mint, whatever. Like it doesn't matter, but it's like those three combinations together, it's just so refreshing. Yeah. And I started to like love that drink, and I was like, oh, okay, I can do this. And I was still like uncomfortable for sure with myself, but like determined that like I could make a change, and like I could maybe live it this way for a month. Yeah. Just 1 month. Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of what that first sober summer, as I called it, looked like.
Okay. Yeah. See, I think that really helps people get into it, is having that just one day at a time mentality is obviously the phrase, but so many people that have come on here I've heard start off with, okay, I'm just taking a month off. Yeah. I'm just taking a week off. And then you start to really see it, because I do think it's really hard in the very beginning to just think like this is forever. Yeah. Because then it seems so difficult and like you can't achieve it. But if you just start off thinking, okay, it's just going to be a month. Okay, now it's just going to be a summer. Now it's just going to be a year. And then you slowly start to realize everything we thought that we needed alcohol for, you don't. Yeah. And that really alcohol was the component that was making us not have fun. Like, yeah, we so much associate with, I still want to be fun. I still want to be fun. Like, was it really fun before, you know, blacking out and not remembering what happened and the anxiety that followed the next day. Like, looking back, like, it was not fun, but that is the first thought afterwards is, I still want to be fun. I still want to have a good time, when really, at least for me, I was not having a good time.
No.
But I thought that I was having a good time. And it's so funny too that almost every single woman that comes on here says that, oh, I need champagne at my wedding day. Like, I don't know what campaign this was that we were fed when we were younger.
No idea.
that is like our number one thing. Like, it was the same for me. Like, never had a boyfriend longer than like a minute. And I was just like, well, what about my wedding day? I was 21 at the time. Like, just thinking about that immediately. And it's so funny because we think that that it's associated with the good times, the celebrations, and even like what you said in the beginning of the podcast about being an adult. Like, we're fed this lie that being a successful woman is you being out at a bar and having a martini, or having a glass of wine, or there's so much glamorization in the industry to keep us buying this lie that it's the alcohol that makes you successful or makes you fun or makes the wedding a good time, when in reality that's, for a lot of us, what is really holding us back and hindering us. So that's amazing that you had so many great people in your life to be able to guide you. And I think that's a great idea, the sober companion in the beginning too, to hold you accountable, because it is really hard, especially when it's so fresh and somebody offers you a drink. It's really hard to say no when you've said yes for so long. And it is just hard to hold yourself accountable when you're faced with that, especially if you feel weird, if you're the only one. Luckily for you, it sounds like you weren't the only one at the dinner, but if you are the only one at the dinner, the only one at the party, sometimes when you're not secure with yourself in those beginning days, because how could you, it's really challenging to say no and stand your ground. So that's great.
Yeah, 100%.
What do you feel like is the best part of sobriety so far, or the greatest gift?
Everything. I mean, I feel like there's a saying that like sobriety will be your bridge back to life. Mm-hmm. But I look at my life today and I look at it from just before I got sober. Mm-hmm. And like I said, the things that I was most concerned about was being able to go to Surf Lodge, or being able to go to like a bar.
Yeah.
I wasn't concerned about like, you know, what would my future look like? What would like my life even look like? It was just the like that like short-sightedness. And I would say sobriety has given me the ability to like live in today, but have hope for tomorrow, and have hope for tomorrow. Not but. And oh, my mother is calling me. My relationship with my mom.
There you go. She knew. She wanted you to talk about her.
She wanted me to talk about her a little bit more.
Yeah.
Which has also been like one of the greatest gifts, because like before I quit drinking, there was this moment, I think I had like maybe like 35 days, like a little bit over a month. And I had really been like working hard at just being a better daughter. But like we had this thing where I was living with them because of the pandemic, and like I would scream at her if I hadn't eaten breakfast yet.
Wow.
Like if we walked into the kitchen at the same time and tried to look at one another before we'd eaten, it was claws were out.
Yeah.
And honestly, now I get to eat breakfast with my mom. Like it's the little things and the big things. It's the having a life versus like when I was drinking, my life was drinking.
100%. Yeah. I definitely relate with that. I think in the early days of sobriety, I really had to repair a lot of relationships that have just grown deeper and deeper over the years, and working on yourself and becoming a better daughter, friend, employee, whatever it may be. But I also wanted to point out that thought of going to the bar, like that was something so big for me, like especially when it's local hot spots, or like you just think that, oh, I have to be there. I have like today, do you still feel like you want to go as much, or did that really leave you?
I mean, I think it's like a human need to like feel included.
Yes.
And I would say today though that like that human need is no longer like the highest power in my life. I would say last night was Halloween. Like I went to an event that I thought was going to be something different. And granted, I learned a lot from it because I want to throw similar events. But at the same time, I was like, these like aren't really my people. And like having the ability to be like, I want to go.
Yeah.
That's okay. Like I never had that ability when I was drinking. Like when I was drinking, I'd be like, okay, well, I'm going to control the situation. We're going to figure out the best way to make this the best night ever. And like, let's get more drinks. Let's get more this. Like, let's do everything. Like I would become both like the director and the actor.
Yeah.
I would just like my role in that night would just become so much more grandiose. Whereas last night it was like I looked at my friends and I was like, what do y'all want to do? And like my boyfriend and another couple was with me and they're like, let's go find a cool couch at the Standard and sit there and hang out and like they want to take a photo of like Elvis and Priscilla and like you know, being able to just go do that and not be like, oh, but like I didn't get the attention of this person or like I didn't do this or like there's like, you know, my goals for nights are just so different now. It's like actually I just want to go home and like be in bed by like 11. Yeah. And like that's so okay because now it's Sunday. I'm not hungover in bed on the Sunday of Halloween weekend, which is it's my 4th Halloween sober, but like for a lot of years there I was not getting out of bed today. And I probably still had like gold spray paint all over my body from whatever costume I was wearing the night before. And like, you know, I woke up today and immediately was chatting with a friend and like, you know, the expectation of how big one night has to be just doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. It's just like, it's one more day.
Exactly.
One day at a time. It's not the end all be all anymore. And I think that was a big part of my drinking was thinking like, this night has to be it. Like I'm gonna go to this party and I'm gonna meet my future husband. Yeah. Because I'm gonna look so good because I had my hair done professionally, I got my makeup done, and I bought my outfit from this like whatever. Like I would like put my week's earnings into a Halloween costume. Yeah. And like yesterday I went and bought like a nice dress and I was Jackie Onassis for Halloween and I did my own hair and my own makeup. And like I actually felt so much better than I ever did putting a week's earnings into a Halloween costume. Yeah. But just doing it on my own. But when I was drinking, I didn't have the self-esteem to even think I could put my own costume together. Yes. Or do my own makeup or like do anything honestly alone. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I was the same way where at least in the beginning, I felt like I have to still go to this bar. I have to still do this thing. And very much, I think it was a mixture of both. Like, I still want it to be there and still want it to be around the same friends doing the same things. And also this need to prove myself. Like, I'm sober, but I'm still fun. I'm still here. And then as the years went on, I fell away from that. And now, like, I still do go out here and there, but it's not that I have to be there. And when I do go out, I definitely relate so much to the big holidays. Like, I would just get obsessed with, like, okay, I need to have this costume and I need these people to be there and I need to be running the show. It needs to be my party and I'm doing this. And then, like, yesterday I didn't even end up going out, but if I did have a Halloween party that I was super interested in going to, I certainly would go. But I love that I'm in a position today where I don't think that going out is the end all be all, or having this costume is the end all be all, or trying to meet a particular person or get someone's attention. I think that for me is the best part of sobriety, is just being okay with the moment and what you're doing and yourself, and not constantly stressing about trying to control others' perception of you. Yeah. And that definitely is something that has fallen away from me.
Totally. To that end, a good friend of mine, he looked at me when I was like pretty early on, and he had like 10 years of sobriety. I think it was like his 10th anniversary, and we like just met recently. But he looked at me and he was like, you know, Serena, what other people think of you is absolutely none of your business. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's absolutely part of my business. Like, I need to make myself look absolutely perfect so that like people think that I'm perfect. And he's like, you could look as perfect as you think you look. Someone is still going to be like, she looks horrible. Yeah. Like, unfortunately, yes. It's not in your control. And that's why, like, you know, there's a prayer that I love, the Serenity Prayer. And like, it literally is like, hey, universe, like, help me understand what I can't control today. And like, help me see what I can. And like, help me live in like being able to change something that I can change and not live in trying to change things that I can't change. And that really changed how I saw the world, because I thought I could control everything. I thought I could make people love me. And like at the end of the day, like, yeah, I was really just looking to be loved by someone. But if I didn't have the love for myself within myself, like I was never going to find someone that loved me, because I was looking at human beings as objects, or like ends to me, it means to ends. Like I wasn't looking at people as people, even though I loved people. Like I've always, like since I was a kid, like really loved people and loved learning about people and like networking and just like growing in that way. But you know, when I was really at the height of my drinking, it was like people were just means to ends. They were not like people that I could love unconditionally.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. I think I would think the same way, where I just wanted to control what everyone thought of about me. And even looking back, I actually hate the way that I was putting myself out there to try to get the attention, to try to get the validation. And I would almost say I'm embarrassed about it, but I feel like everything happens for a reason, and it was my journey here. But yeah, I absolutely hate the way that I was putting myself out into the world to try to get people to validate me. And once you actually have that self-validation, that's not something that you're seeking or feel like you need that external validation. So I completely relate to that. And today I actually care about, when meeting people, about their story and listening to what they're saying and hearing their story. Whereas before, when you're so focused on, okay, what do they think about me now? And I have to stay this way and that way. And now you're just thinking and thinking and thinking, and you can't even hear authentically what anyone else is saying or doing or being, because you're all about me. Yeah. And it's not in a way where you're self-obsessed, but not in a way where you think you're so amazing and that's why you're self-obsessed. It's self-obsessed because you're insecure. Yeah. And you're just continuously thinking in a whirlwind about how can I control the situation, when in reality you absolutely can't. And I love that.
And it's tiring.
Yeah.
It's so tiring.
It is exhausting.
Like, I wonder why I was tired all the time when I was drinking. It's like, well, you're doing a lot of work.
Yeah.
You're just not putting your energy in places that actually work. I love the saying that humility is not thinking less of myself, it's thinking about myself less of the time. So I love that. Humility is asking the people what are their stories. It's like getting to know people on a really genuine level. Yeah. And you know, authenticity is the most important identifier for humans. Like you can see through someone's bullshit pretty quickly. Yeah. Like when you know that someone wants something from you, like you're gonna like, oh, like you naturally put your guard up. Yeah. And I don't know, I think back to like when I was drinking, and it's like, yeah, I would go into bars and be like, so are you gonna buy me a drink? Yeah. Like I'd like go up to people asking for, and it's just like so classless, but it's like that's where like this disease and like my inability to really process alcohol in any normal fashion brought me was like losing sight of my own principles, losing sight of like, you know, the bar kept shifting and shifting and shifting, where it was like, okay, like I'll stop drinking when, but then like that thing would happen, and I'd be like, okay, well I'm gonna stop drinking when this happens, and then that would happen, and I just couldn't let go of it. Yeah. That bar would just continuously shift until finally it shifted far enough, and I looked around and I had to look at myself. So yeah, I definitely think you start to normalize behavior that before drinking or growing up you would have been really turned off of. But when you get into that lifestyle, then exactly what you're saying, then once you reach that rung, then you're like, oh, this is fine. Actually, other people, there's always justification. Other people are doing this. Okay, I would stop if I got to that rung. And then it just keeps going and going and going until you're completely out of control. So I think that is something that people really struggle with. And then especially when you said earlier about okay, maybe I'll just drink wine. I think a lot of people will try to bargain with themselves and say, okay, I'm only going to drink. I'm going to try to avoid any drugs that I may take when I'm out. Okay, well, now I'm actually just going to do beer and wine. I'm not going to do hard liquor. Okay, now I'm just going to do wine. And there's so many different tricks you can play on your mind. And I think that's what ultimately a lot of people
people struggle with getting to, okay, I just don't have to drink. Like there doesn't have to be all these bargains or ways to try to fix it, when really first you have to fix yourself, and also just abstain from that behavior.
That one thing.
But I know you do a lot of work with different nonprofits and organizations. I would love to hear about what it is that you do with that.
Yeah, for sure. So I quit my job recently.
Congratulations.
I don't know if I said this on the podcast or said it before, but I started drinking more heavily when I was 18 and went to college. And when I got to college, I had my camera and I would photograph everywhere in high school. Like I loved photography. I'd live in the darkroom. My dad was a photographer. And so like just always loved the art. And when I got to, you know, a big undergrad business school, put the camera away and I just started drinking. And so from, you know, 18 to 29, I worked in the corporate world and I would do a lot of volunteering on the side and like try to get involved with different organizations. And finally this month, at the beginning of this month, I quit my job in corporate America in order to pursue my passion just for a little while. Like I have no idea what this will hold for me, but, you know, I'm excited. And like, because I'm sober, like, and I have so many different tools now, I have the ability to take moves like this and not think to myself like, well, now I'm unemployable. No, like I'm working on more skills. I'm in school. I'm still networking. I'm still doing so many different things. It's just that I don't have a current corporate title. So one of those things that I'm doing now while I'm working on my photography career is working with a nonprofit called Generation SOS. And so what Generation SOS does is we bring young sober speakers into high schools. They share their experience with substance abuse and with mental health. And then they open the room to Q&A. And it's been a really incredible experience working with them and also speaking for them at a number of schools because, you know, for me, still being young, I got sober pretty young. Like I'm talking to myself when I was in high school. And it's like when I was in high school, there were so many signs that like I was potentially going to have an issue with alcohol later on. A doctor when I was 12 years old told me, hey, just by the way, like, you know, you might not be able to process alcohol as other people can. You should be careful. Because when I was really young, I was showing signs of having an addictive personality. And I had no idea, but that pediatrician was sober, like a lot of years. And he could see it in me, in like my family and everything. And so he just gave me that warning. And it stuck out to me like my whole life, hearing that one warning and seeing this pediatrician who, oh my God, did I love him? Like since I was a little kid, I have looked up to people. Like I want what they have. I've always had the mentality of like, how did they get there? Like I want to learn more about them. Like so curious. And so, yeah, working with Generation SOS has been a gift, really. And I'm helping them find more sober speakers so we can get into more schools, working with outreach to different schools, and trying to get their program into more schools. Because I really believe that, like, if I had had a program like Generation SOS when I was in high school, I would have sought help earlier. Now, I firmly believe that, like, it is genetic, that my body does not process alcohol like everyone else's, and, like, that's okay. Like, I'm in total acceptance of that. But had I even heard the message that, like, hey, it's okay to be sober, like, maybe I would have taken more classes in college and, like, maybe my education would have become more of my higher power. But, you know, when I got to college, it was just like, I didn't know what the warning signs looked like. So over time, because alcoholism is a progressive disease, I fell more and more into the disease. And I lost sight of those warnings and of those markers. And I just fell more and more into myself, into the self-centeredness that I had. And so, yeah, I work with Generation SOS. They're incredible. Also, when I was in high school, there was one speaker that came, and, like, you know, high schools, like, they'll bring in speakers, they'll bring in, like, different programs. I don't even remember the drug and alcohol program they brought in. Like, couldn't even tell you what that program even looked like. But they brought in one guy who I think was just like a motivational speaker or something. But he left me with the saying, live and let live. And I still, from that day that I heard that saying, would say it to myself, like, multiple times a week. And a reason that I loved that saying in that moment was that he told a part of his story that I really resonated with. Like, he told the story of how he was scared to poop in public. And I looked at this guy and I was like, same. And then he said, live and let live. And that's how the way you get through that moment. And so, yeah, that's why, like, the process of storytelling, the reason that people listen to this podcast, it's like people are listening to identify with something. And that's what Generation SOS does, is like we bring these identifiable stories into schools to educate kids on, like, you know, you don't have to be homeless in order to seek help if you're dealing with issues with substance abuse. And what does substance abuse actually look like? Well, if you're 15 years old and the second time you're drinking, you're blacking out, that's a problem. Like, if you're thinking about, like, you're 16, you're sophomore, whatever, junior in high school, and you're like, when's the next prom? Like, when's the prom after party? And it's October. Like, you might have a problem with alcohol.
Yeah.
Because, like, clearly, like, alcohol is the number one thing on your mind. Like, partying is the number one thing on your mind. Whereas, like, life is so much bigger than that. And, like, when I was in high school, I would look forward to the breaks from school because we couldn't drink at my boarding school. But when I went home, I would, like, inevitably find, like, a Smirnoff Ice. And, like, I would get that relief that I was seeking. I just looked for relief in everywhere I possibly could. And, like, drugs and alcohol really gave that to me for a very long time. But had I known that that sort of relief has to come from something else in order to have, like, a sustainable relief, I probably would have tried to seek that other option. And, like, you know, for me, that other option has really become, like, what does my spiritual practice look like? What does my ability to help other people look like today? And those two come hand in hand because, like, in order for me to have a spiritual practice, I need to be taking action and helping other people. And so, yeah, like, the ability to share your story is just, I think it is the most effective way to help people get the help that they need. And yeah, that's what Generation SOS does. So
that's amazing. No, I remember the same thing. We had one guy come in and talk about addiction, and I remember carrying a lot of what he said with me. Like, I was always afraid to try more than just alcohol forever because of what one line that this man said, but then eventually I forgot about it. But we didn't really have a lot of seminars like that. It was very unusual. And I remember that you could hear a pin drop in the auditorium, and that's how engaged that everybody was in to this particular man's story. But then again, he was a pro NBA player that kind of fell out of it, and then had all these struggles, and definitely his message was incredible and his story is incredible. He's an amazing man. But I think it definitely would be great if more relatable people came in that was just a mother from the community, or people like yourself where you worked in corporate America for a decade and you're not even 30, that those are definitely stories that kids would be able to relate to and recognize and see you as just somebody else in the community that did have an issue, and you're not the man under the bridge, and that you can seek help earlier. I think that definitely would have made a huge impact on myself when I was younger. And I think today that kids are a lot more open-minded and receptive, honestly, than even when we were in school. I think the idea, at least in my town, around mental health and therapy or anything like that was very shunned. Like, if you needed therapy, you were crazy type of mindset. So I do think over the years that people are a lot more open and receptive to that. So that's even better. But even looking back, I definitely could have benefited from a program like that. Like, I didn't know the warning signs. I knew certain things were bad, but I didn't know warning signs of addictive personalities, or I remember blacking out quite young, and that's something that I didn't know was really a red flag. And I was laughing when you were talking about the prom thing, because that was so me. Like, prom was yesterday. I'm talking about next year's prom. Like, always talking about next party, next event, next time that I could have that escapism and that alcohol. And I really hid it at least in the beginning, within, oh, I'm just looking forward to Halloween, prom, whatever party it may be. So I justified it in my head as, oh, I don't have a problem, everyone's excited about that, but it wasn't that. So I think that would be incredible if younger kids were able to identify with somebody and remember that, because you don't even realize what a large impact you can have on people in high school or people in middle school, even because they're not exposed to the other side oftentimes. Like if you do have it in your family or your community, then you are, luckily, but I definitely didn't have the exposure myself. So that's incredible that you go back and you do that with kids, because I think a lot of times, like, I try to help a lot of people, but I definitely don't go back and try to help the next generation, which really could use it the most.
Mm-hmm.
And then, do you have any other big plans moving forward that is like a dream of yours within sobriety or recovery that you want to share, or start your own type of business around it?
I would say that recovery is like definitely very personal to me.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so long as I can have recovery as like the foundation of my life,
Mm-hmm.
like, you know, a house that doesn't have a strong foundation will crumble into the earth.
Yeah.
I need to treat myself like that. Like, my sobriety is the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you want to think of it in another analogy, is my sobriety is the ice cream and the ice cream cone.
Mm-hmm.
The sprinkles on top is the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And that attitude, honestly, is something that I'm like so grateful for.
Mm-hmm.
And honestly, I hope that I can just continue having that attitude. And in terms of like the rest of my life, like, you know, it is one day at a time. Right now I am building my photography portfolio. I have a website. I'm also digitizing all of my dad's negatives from like the 50s to the 80s. And I'm hoping to build a book of his work, essentially. He knew some like really cool people, some pretty famous alcoholics, actually. He's like told me stories about Ernest Hemingway, JFK, like Hugh Hefner, like, you know, all these names that we know. And
Yeah.
he has all these like untold stories.
Wow.
And so I really want to get that into like some sort of a book for him.
Mm-hmm.
He turns 90 on the 27th
Oh, wow.
of November. So
That would be amazing.
you know, I think the plans for my life that I had when I was 21
Mm-hmm.
are so different from the plans I have for my life right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that. Like, I love that because of sobriety, I get this gift that like my life keeps on changing like every day. And all I want to do, like, I'm living on borrowed time.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my cousin, who was sober for most of my life, like, or most of my adult life, he died of this disease.
Wow.
2 months before I got sober. And I mean, his mom has started this beautiful program on the East End of Long Island to like educate more parents of like, what does this disease really look like?
Mm-hmm.
And she's incredible in the community as well. And, you know, our community lost one of our very good friends, a kid that a lot of us have grown up with. Like, I met him during the pandemic, and he was just like literally the biggest ray of sunshine.
Mm-hmm.
And so we walk for him in the Shatterproof Walk like every year with his whole family. And it's like the most beautiful thing. So yeah, I would just say, like, you know, what do my plans look like right now? I hope that I can just keep helping people.
Mm-hmm.
Like, where can I be the most useful to the most people? And right now it's like, gonna keep helping people. I want to build this photography work because I do really see, like, you know, creativity is something that helps people in so many different ways. Even just talking about the experience of creativity helps people. Because when I was in the depths of my addiction, like, if you asked me to draw like a smiley face on a piece of paper, I would be like, it's not going to be perfect, so I'm not going to draw it. Like, that's how my brain worked. And like, I lived such a limited life. So it's like, the more that I can talk about creativity, the more I can be creative and like show the world that like you can go from not being able to draw a smiley face to living a creative life and having a creative career, that would be awesome. And yeah, I do want to continue helping Generation SOS grow. I think that is a really big part of what I view like the next couple years of my life to be. I want us to be across the country, not just in the tri-state area. We're in Miami, LA, Houston, Las Vegas, and then mostly tri-state schools. but yeah, you know, I'm open to what life gives me every day. And like all I want is a new experience in life.
That's great. And then with your photography, do you feel like that's your biggest outlet? Like, how has sobriety, I know you said beforehand you really didn't have the capacity to fully dive into it. How do you feel like your sobriety has helped your photography or inspired you?
Yeah, I mean, when I put down drinking, I literally, like, I think when I had 4 days of sobriety, I went on Canon and I just bought a new camera. I did not have the money to do that. But if someone told me, like, you're gonna have a lot more time.
Yeah.
Like, you're not drinking anymore. Like, think of how much time in my day I was using for drinking. Well, I should probably try to use it in somewhere else, because like if I didn't have a hobby, I was going to be bored and I was probably going to go back to my old ways because that's what I'm comfortable with. Someone else told me be comfortable being uncomfortable, and make uncomfortable your new comfortable, which is a lot of comfortables. But, you know, I've just taken so many suggestions, and like that, that's how I've gotten to the point where I'm like, photography is something that I love and that I really think I need to be doing.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'm literally open to anything that happens in the photography space. I mean, I just met one photographer. She told me to show up at this place. At that place, I met a New York Times photographer. Through him, I met someone else. And then I took a class in New York. Someone recommended. That was being taught by a New York Times photographer. She's connecting me to other people. It's like, I'm just open to what life has to throw me right now, especially with photography. My work is up in a gallery in Palm Beach, Florida, which is, it's definitely a goal to get in more galleries and like get more prints out in the world, and just keep growing. Like, that's all.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Have you found any other passions within sobriety or any activities that you do?
Small plug for SoulCycle. I have done a lot of SoulCycle in sobriety.
Yeah.
And a lot of SoulCycle instructors are also sober. So
wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Yeah.
Sam Y, he's on the Upper East Side. He's all over New York. He's been sober for like 8 years or something.
That's amazing.
And you know, when I was like hungover and I would show up to Connor's class, like he would keep pushing me, and I'd be like, oh my God. Like I said to him one day, I drank a bottle of wine last night. Can you please stop doing that to me? And he looked at me. He was like, I never want to hear you say that in my class again. And I had no idea that he was like 5 years sober at that point.
Wow.
And like him saying that to me is a core memory. And it's another thing of like, another reason to stop drinking. Like, exercise really has become so much a part of my daily life. And, you know, when I was in college, I started doing Bikram yoga. And I like called my mom and I was like, Mom, I'm going to go to India and I'm going to become a Bikram yoga instructor. That's what I want to do when I graduate from a business school. And she looked at me and she was like, we just supported you for business school. You need to go into business. And I was like, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
Like, I just, whatever. So
like, I want to do yoga.
I want to do yoga. And I would say too, like, I'm not perfect about any of this, but like I have gotten a lot more open to like yoga again. And I've gotten a lot more into just feeling how my body feels each day. Like being more in touch with my body. There's this book, The Body Keeps a Score, that I love, and I just pick it up at random chapters. I've never actually read it one way through, but that has so many nuggets of wisdom that like if you pay attention to certain things in your body, like your body holds trauma. And so like learning more about like, where is my body holding trauma? Like, what else can I do today that like maybe can make the, you know, neighborhood between my ears a little bit more peaceful. And if it's like stretching my hips out, or like there's stuff like little things like that I'm like, oh, like these smallest changes, like the butterfly effect, like the smallest changes can make the biggest changes in your life. So yeah, focusing on those little things. And I'm in a relationship that has almost been a year, which is like so unfathomable, and I would call that a hobby because it's quite a lot of time.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And he's also sober, and
that's
so
amazing.
It's just, it is like the biggest gift of my life that I get to like not only be in like the longest, best, healthiest relationship of my life, but also share a lifestyle with someone. And like for both of us, like our sobriety comes first, then everything else.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't even say relationship is 2 for either of us.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't come second. It's like maybe third. Like there's other things, and like that's perfect.
That's
like
amazing.
I thought for my whole life, like when I would get into a relationship, like that would be it. then my life would be perfect. And it's like, well, no, life is lifey. Like, life keeps going. Just because you're in a relationship doesn't mean that you've made it. You actually have a lot more life to live.
Yeah. That's just the beginning, really.
Yeah. And so, yeah, it's been such a gift to like get to like really grow with him, I think, this year, and grow into my photography. And like, he fully supports me. Like, he met me, I was working, you know, in advertising and kind of like starting a new role, complaining about it, whatever. And like, you know, today I just feel so much more aligned, like with like where I am, what I'm doing. I'm helping people, I'm being creative, I'm learning new things every day. And I think just being a lifelong learner is probably like the greatest hobby anyone could have.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's it. I've killed every plant in my apartment. Never quite picked up that hobby.
Me too. I have the little ones in the windows. I can't even do them.
I can't. I know. I don't know what's wrong. It's just not the hobby that's meant for me.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah, I think, and I would also say that in sobriety, I've had a lot more time to get into things like conservation and caring about the climate. I think before I got sober, I didn't care about anything bigger than like my headspace. And now that I am sober, I'm like, oh, there's a lot of things going on in the world. Like, I should probably pay attention to some of those things. And like, also, can I be of service to any of those communities? Like, I met a foundation a couple weeks ago, and they said something about how like only 2% of all nonprofits are geared towards the climate, and even smaller percentage of that is like the amount of money that goes to them. And I thought to myself, like, you know, I've thrown a bunch of charity events in sobriety and before sobriety. Like, how can I help throw them an event? It's that mindset of like always wanting to be helpful anywhere I go. That has, I think, now taken up like a lot of my time.
That's great. Yeah. I love that mind shift, and I feel like I experienced the same thing where it was like, first I was just trying to throw parties all the time, and then you actually want to give back and help people, because if one more person can experience sobriety, then I feel like our job is done. Well, done for the minute.
And even just like being helpful as a human. Like, it doesn't have to be like yes, sobriety is a foundation for the rest of my life, but it's not everything that I do. Yeah. Like, we can be super, super multifaceted people. And for me, in my life, like my story, alcohol became the only facet. So when I got rid of that, I became a multifaceted person. I actually also threw a bunch of parties when I was drinking. And I got like 30 people involved. We threw like all these events over the course of 6 months before the pandemic started. And I remember founding it with my friend, and I like said to him, like, look, we've all partied all the time. Let's just party with a purpose. So our motto became party with a purpose. And we started just like throwing these events and like really trying to raise money for rebuilding some of the Bahamas after Hurricane Dorian. And like, it was a great experience. Like, we definitely helped people, but like, was my mindset, I want to help people, number one? No. My mindset was like, let's party with a purpose. Like, I want to drink and feel good about it. Whereas like now it's like, no, I just want to help people. Like, that's truly at the end of the day. Like, if I wake up, I think my higher power, the universe, whatever, like, and I ask him like, please help me be helpful to other people. And when I go to bed, I say, thank you for keeping me sober today. And like, thank you for whatever I did to maybe help someone else. And like, you never know what that could be. Like, it could be just like walking down the street, and because I'm not depressed and hungover anymore, or like, you know, on whatever I need to be in order to be happy, I'm genuinely happy. Throwing a genuine smile at like a random person down the street, that could have made their day. Like, it's those small shifts, like very, very small things that can really ripple into some big effects.
When you first started dating when you were sober, did you decide I need to date someone else sober? Or did that naturally happen? That's something we talk about a lot on here, because everyone has a different mindset around it. And I feel like sometimes it's so important. And then other people have relationships with people that aren't sober and think that works for them.
I think it's to each his own. When I first started dating, I took about a year off of dating. And to tell a 25-year-old to take a year off of dating is horrible. I mean, all those thoughts of scarcity came up for me. And the longer I dated myself for that first year, it was such a gift. I learned so much more about myself. And like, I didn't stop per se dating. Like, I still went on dates, but the difference was that because I was sober, like, I had a lot more self-worth. And I wasn't immediately thinking like, I have to do this in order for them to love me forever. It was like, okay, like, let me just go on like friend dates. Like, I started going on more coffee dates, and I started wanting to meet people. Like, you know, if I say like, let's grab coffee at 9 a.m. on Saturday morning, who on Hinge is going to say yes to that? Well, not the people that are partying till 3 in the morning who are hungover on Saturday morning. So like, I want to find people that have a similar lifestyle. And I did date someone for about 6 months last year. And he was drinking, and like, it was fine. Like, a lot of my friends still drink. Like, that was fine. The fact that he was drinking was not like this, like, whoa, like I can't even talk to him. Like, absolutely not. Like, the reality is that alcohol is like a mainstay in society today. So like, if I want to still be a member of society, I have to accept the fact that like whoever I'm dating might be a drinker, and that's fine. I did cycle through the dating apps and like select like not drinking, just to, you know, see what was out there. And I've been on a couple of those dates, and those were great dates, and like that's also great too. But I think, like I said, when I was drinking, I took dating and honestly most men to be like a means to an end. And in that frame of mind, I almost took away the humanity of men. Like, they were just like things. They weren't like potentially my best friend in the whole wide world. And so when I started dating soberly, that was one of the things I was looking for. I was like, I want to find a best friend that I can spend the rest of my life with. Like, that's top of mind for me now. It's not like who's going to pay for my dinner per se next week. Like, it was, I want to have a really big, beautiful relationship. And so, you know, a lot of work went into my ability to start dating. As you can tell, it took a lot of shifts and a lot of time. And I would say, like, when I finally did, it was so clear to me that I was ready. And then I got into one relationship. It didn't go well. Got out of that. I took off time. Got into another one. I took off time. And by giving myself time in between some of these relationships too, like, I dated myself even more. Like, I spent even more time thinking like, okay, like, what went into this that went well, what didn't, and just taking inventory on it, honestly. Like, there's, you know, a business that doesn't take inventory will go out of business. Like, if I'm treating my life like a business transaction, because, like, you know, finding the love of your life or your life partner is the biggest business transaction you'll ever make in your own life. You know, I want to make sure that I was taking inventory and like seeing like, okay, cool. Like, I learned from that. Every experience is a learning experience. And I say that to a lot of my friends who are dating soberly. And I'm like, just because you had one bad date doesn't mean it's the end of the world. Like, what did you learn from that date? How did you show up? What frame of mind were you in? Like, what were you wearing when you went into it? Like, were you in like a super tight black dress with your makeup done and got your hair done? Like, okay, you showed up with all these preconceptions of who you want this person to think you are. And like, for me, I went on those coffee dates. I like didn't put on any makeup for some of those coffee dates. And like, to me, that was insane. But it was coffee. And I actually just like treated it like a game for myself. I was like, I'm just going to show up. And if they like me as I am on 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, probably running late because it's 9 a.m. on a Saturday morning, like, that's also insane. Like, they'll like me with just a little bit of mascara on or like nothing at all. And yeah, dating without alcohol became the most fun experience of my life. And now being in a relationship without alcohol is also the most fun experience of my life.
No, I experienced very similar things, especially in the beginning. And for me, dating sober was the scariest thing. That was like monumental that I went on even one date sober, because I remember before that, just every date I went on, I would have to have a drink on my way there, have a drink as soon as I got there, and that was so much of it. So I think it's really, really difficult to start dating in sobriety, but it's definitely a learning curve, and I think takes some trial and error, but that's amazing.
I didn't do it perfectly by any means. And I mean, something to acknowledge is that like dating is such a human thing. It is so vulnerable, especially in New York City. Like, there's literally no end to the number of people in the city that you can go on a date with. And so for that reason, it's like, you know, if, you know, anyone listening to this is like struggling with dating sober, like, that's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you're not the only one. Like, it's hard.
I think people are just struggling dating.
Period. Yeah, I know. And yeah, when I was drinking, I definitely struggled. So
Yeah. So what would you tell someone that isn't sure they have a problem, since that's a lot of the work you do? Like, what are the signs that people should really be looking for in order to know that they may need help or may need to talk to someone?
I would say if you're questioning it, you might have a problem. And I've had a couple occasions where like a friend had called me and they've been like, Serena, you're doing really great. Like, why are you doing so great? Like, what's going on? What are you doing? They don't phrase it like that, but you know, and I will share a bit of my experience and my story, and they'll be like, yeah, like I think alcohol has an unhealthy spot in my life. And you know, if you're questioning it, just go talk to someone. Because like I said, like the experience of hearing someone else's story is the most transformational thing you can do. Listening for me has become a skill that I didn't have, frankly, when I was drinking. But, you know, when it came to asking the people in my life that were sober, like, how are you doing life without alcohol? Like, I learned how to listen. And as I listened, I identified. And the identification grew to the point that I finally was like, why don't I just try it? Like, if, you know, someone is questioning like their relationship at all, do sober October, dry January, like do it. I have a lot of friends who have tried those months and they've failed horribly. And to me, honestly, if you are powerless to that, like you can't even stay sober for 30 days, like that also could be a sign. I'll never forget, it was like the spring of 2018. My one friend who I eventually went to, she had just gotten sober. And I was on antibiotics that a doctor told me that if you drink, you will bleed from your stomach lining and throw up blood.
Oh my God.
On this antibiotic. And I had 30 days to be on it. It was like stupidly long.
Yeah.
And I was like, God, what are you doing to me? And I drank on it one night. And like, that terrified me. I didn't bleed from my stomach lining, thank God.
Yeah.
But I still drank on it one night, and that terrified me so much that I was like, I don't have the self-control around alcohol to take 30 days off for a medical reason. And that really got me into that mindset of like, ooh, this could be a problem. And looking at the people that weren't drinking and like thinking I should probably talk to them. But, you know, denial is really strong. And I kept bargaining with myself, like, I'm fine. I don't want to admit to it yet. But I would just say, like, I could have saved myself 2 full years of pain if I just started talking when I first saw it.
Yeah.
And I had seen other signs before that too. But like, I just never wanted to stop. Like, there was never the like, you know, Serena, you really should be stopping. It's the, Serena, you need to fix how you drink. So once I had that experience of like having to stop, having a reason to stop and not being able to, that was when I knew I really had a problem with it.
That's very helpful, I think, for so many people, because I think that is the number one reason that people don't get sober, is that they don't know they have a problem, or they're still waiting for X to happen. So that's super helpful. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story and giving so much insight into what a fulfilling sober life looks like today. And again, congratulations on 3 years sober. And thank you for coming on and getting real.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in and getting real with us. Podcasts will be posted every other Wednesday on Spotify and YouTube. Please reach out via DM if you want to chat.